Addictiveness through simplicity is a goal that a lot of small, bite-sized games seek to accomplish. They keep the overall experience digestible enough that you can learn the basics in mere minutes, and steadily improve from there. And there's often a reason to continue coming back. Whether it be to unlock more things or simply get the high score, it calls you to return for more on a regular basis, and it's difficult to refuse because it's fun and doesn't require an immense time commitment per sitting. You can just kick back for as little as 10 minutes and lose yourself in that minuscule world you purchased for probably just a few dollars. One of the earliest and most successful instances of addictive simplicity in video games is none other than the best-selling puzzle game of all time, Tetris. These falling blocks have left behind a legacy that could be worthy of its own separate video. But no matter which version of Tetris you may be playing, the skeletal structure of the experience is always the same. You move and rotate slowly descending puzzle pieces to fit into each other, and when you make a straight line from one side of the puzzle screen to the other, you clear it for points. And if you clear 4 lines at once, you accomplish a Tetris, nabbing yourself a significant score increase. To a person who might not have ever seen Tetris until right now, it might not seem like anything special. But this game took the world by storm from the late 80s to the mid 90s. It was the pinnacle of a game that was very easy to start, but hard to put down. Studies were even done to test the cognitive effects that the game has on the human brain, which led to the discovery of increased brain activity while playing. This was later expanded on with the additional findings that showed playing Tetris could help distract from various cravings for things such as food, cigarettes, or alcohol. And even more astounding, a 2013 study discovered that regular Tetris sessions helped treat older adolescents who suffered from amblyopia, or lazy eye, proving to be a significantly more favorable alternative to patching their strong eye in order to train their weak one. The phenomenon of Tetris is a detailed story, but the main point of it all for this video is that its resounding success at finding the perfect amount of simplicity and addictiveness is something that many game developers seek to emulate for similarly small games. And this leads us to the very recent explosion in popularity for a single $3 game that was minding its own business on Steam until it became the talk of the town only a few months ago. Vampire Survivors. Developed and maintained by one man, Luca Galante, also known by his online handle, Ponkle, Vampire Survivors is a casual, gothic horror shoot-'em-up with roguelite elements. It sounds like a bit too much of a mouthful describing it to be that simplistic, but it is. Upon starting the game, you can browse various menus to see what kind of unlockables you'll be able to acquire. But if you click the big Start button, you only need to pick a character and pick a stage before you're thrust into the action with no direction. But thankfully, direction isn't really needed, and the game soon speaks for itself by having your character attack automatically while enemies begin to crawl into view. But you don't just stand there, obviously. You still need to move around to avoid being touched by enemies, who will damage and kill you. As you defeat your monstrous foes, they begin to drop little gems that offer experience points, and eventually, you'll level up. Every time you gain a level, you get a pick of 3 or 4 random weapons or accessories which make you stronger, including possible level ups for weapons you already own. Additionally, there's chests dropped by occasionally appearing boss enemies, which power up your currently equipped gear and gives you a fat gold bonus on top of that. Chests can contain either 1, 3, or 5 level ups at once. The ultimate goal of every run is to max out your loadout and try to survive the 30 minutes needed to officially clear the stage as your enemies grow stronger and stronger. And the stages themselves are quite simple. They're not divided into rooms like many other roguelites. They're simply one massive, endlessly spawning tile set. And after every run, you save up your gold to spend on permanent upgrades, which are refundable in case you want to allocate them differently. Now, some people who haven't played it by now might think, well, that doesn't sound anywhere close to being as simple as Tetris. And you would be right. There are a ton of variables that make the game the cohesive experience that it is. But that doesn't mean it's difficult to jump in. In fact, let's begin our dive into the simplicity and addictiveness of Vampire Survivors by starting there, at the beginning. When you open up the game for the first time, you only have a few characters to choose from and one stage to play in, so how you start is already quite simple. Progression in this game is actually quite linear. The more you play, the more you unlock additional weapons, accessories, characters, and even gameplay mechanics. You're not overwhelmed from the get-go by a bunch of unexplained systems. You have a very clear beginning point, and by the time you understand the basics of the gameplay and how most, or all, of your starting tools work, that's when the game starts to give you more, and you combine your already obtained knowledge with new knowledge you're about to acquire by using new weapons and characters for the first time to see how they work together. When you jump into the action for the first time, you might be surprised to find that you don't attack on your own. The game does it for you automatically, as I mentioned earlier. This is another reason as to why the game's simplicity is so effective. It might seem like a design decision that could make the game too easy, but it soon becomes clear that it was made around the fact. With weapons that attack on their own, many of them either aim in certain directions, aim at the closest enemies, or aim randomly. Others simply stay around your character as a defensive barrier, or they may just clear the screen entirely at regular intervals. Proper kiting and positioning becomes increasingly important as the level progresses, and the enemies become stronger and manage to tank more hits. And later, they begin to spawn in alarming amounts. Vampire Survivors is like a twin-stick shooter, but with the necessity of aiming taken out, and without the need to constantly be pressing down on an attack button. All you need to focus on is where you're walking, which isn't always easy when you need to pay attention to every part of the edge of your screen to see where your foes are coming from, and where the nearest walls are so you don't accidentally get yourself cornered. Aside from simply moving, the only other skill that's really needed is decision making. And this is where build variety comes in, and it's a big contributor to the addictiveness aspect of the Vampire Survivors experience. It features the perfect amount of roguelite elements to make experimentation worth trying. The sheer volume of resources and tools you can unlock is astounding, and they all have their own unique traits, strengths, and purposes and allow you to mix and match almost any combination to make it to the end of the 30-minute gauntlet. I've had some pretty bad runs that landed me awkward weapon combinations before, but with proper kiting of the enemies, I was able to last long enough to get the levels I needed to make those weapons truly powerful and make it to the 30-minute mark. It's easy to commit to a run when every piece of equipment you get is useful. Not every weapon is strong right out of the gate, but if you combine even the seemingly worst weapons with the right accessories to bump up its area of effect, attack duration, projectile speed, and raw power, then even a pea shooter can become a nuke. You become the final boss of a bullet hell made by Cave or something. Whether you want to wing it entirely or focus on a specific set of gear, the game ensures that any build is viable, and this is important to minimizing the feeling that your time is being wasted. The best bite-sized gaming experiences make every second worth investing, and it's easy to return to a game that gives you the freedom to play how you want and rewards you for that time. And speaking of rewards, this is another thing the game offers in spades, and at different levels of commitment. It's why playing the game has been likened to receiving straight shots of dopamine. One thing that our primitive brains truly enjoy when playing video games is immediate and visual representation of progress. The simplest and fastest way that this progress is conveyed in almost any game similar to this one is number go up. I know it sounds almost demeaning, but it's true. What better way to inform the player that they're kicking ass than to give them many ways to visually confirm it on a moment-to-moment basis? Every time you kill an enemy and grab a gem, your experience meter goes up. Whenever you level up and gain a new weapon or improve an existing one, you deal greater damage. When you get a new accessory or power-up, your stats increase. When you open a chest, you get a ton of gold. And this visual progress isn't limited to just numbers. It includes the eye-popping amount of effects happening on screen. Once you near the end of your 30-minute run, You're blowing up enemies on every inch of your monitor in a colorful and satisfying display of sensory chaos. Particles are flashing everywhere and a bunch of sounds are going off to convey how much of an unstoppable badass you've become in the last half hour. And it feels good. It all feels good. And the only thing you had to do to accomplish it was move around with enough finesse to not get killed. Think about all those mobile idling games where you simply start a level and set your phone down and it basically plays itself with zero input. Usually you can still tap or swipe the screen to progress faster, but that usually isn't needed. That type of game is built on watching numbers go up with minimal interaction, but sometimes that means feeling detachment from that automatic success. Vampire Survivors manages to avoid that by requiring just a bit more active participation, enough of it that you actually feel like your actions are why you're succeeding. And if you do well enough, you earn the ability to simply stand still and let the game play itself. With good movement and decision making, you can become strong enough within 15 minutes that the game just can't kill you, and that's very gratifying. Watching numbers go up, meters fill, and enemies explode isn't the only way the game rewards you either. As I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of unlockables in the form of extra characters, weapons, accessories and power-ups, gameplay mechanics, stages, and coin to buy those permanent upgrades. And as of the time I'm writing the script for this video, the game has a total of 114 Steam achievements. These provide longer-term goals for the player to strive for, so even if the constant flow of dopamine provided by numbers and explosions starts to wear off, you have greater rewards to reach for that require more runs. It's very easy to come back to a game that gives you something every time you play it, even if it's just for 15 minutes. Strictly speaking, you are constantly rewarded with awesome stuff for just moving around. It's a consistent feedback loop of non-stop gratification, and because you actually exert the effort to stay alive, you never feel like you didn't earn it. Overall, Vampire Survivors is the modern-day pinnacle of simplicity meets addictiveness. It's a game that's not intimidating to jump into, it's not complicated to learn, it has easy controls, there's a seemingly countless number of weapon and power-up loadout combinations to utilize with no need for preparation, and the game is extremely generous with how it rewards you, both visually in the heat of combat and in the long term with unlockable content. It doesn't waste your time, and you can feel fulfilled even if you're playing for as little as 15 minutes. And on top of that, the game is a meager $3 on Steam, has no downloadable content or microtransactions, and can run on the simplest of machines. So it even has accessibility on its side too. In a world where AAA titles take up all the marketing space and a huge portion of online discourse, it's nice to receive a game like this. A small experience made by a small or single-person team that's easy to pick up and hard to put down. And I know this video is titled an analysis because it's focused on one specific aspect of the game, but I figured I might also take the opportunity to do a little bit of a review, which should be easy because I went over a huge portion of the game's mechanics and content already. First, the sprite work is really good, including the legally distinct players that seem like they would fit eerily well into a Castlevania game. The artwork also doesn't shy away from wearing its inspiration on its sleeve, but I think that's just part of the game's charm. And then there's the music. This game has some surprising bangers on here that are really fun to listen to while you're cutting down thousands of bats, skeletons, mummies, ghosts, and everything except vampires, funnily enough. Speaking of which, the enemy variety is absolutely massive. It's only fitting for a game with such a library of characters, weapons, and power-ups to have an equally large bestiary too. Admittedly, the game is in early access, but honestly, I can't really tell that while I'm playing, because it feels like a totally feature-complete experience. I can't recommend enough trying out Vampire Survivors. For a measly $3, you can play one of the most addictive games released all year, or even last year. Whether you find yourself in the mood for playing something small and fun, or if you want to play something but don't know what, or if you're just not that much in the mood for video games at all lately, I still think you should give this game a try. It respects your time and your money, unlike certain other games released recently. It's one of the best values money can get you on Steam, and it might just sink its claws into you like it did to me and many, many others. This concludes my thoughts on Vampire Survivors and its addictive simplicity. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.